to the reporting for Chapter 5 of the Methane Abatement Handbook. Today we are joined with by guests from the International Energy Agency, Casey Michaels, who's legal counsel. They are based in Paris. Casey also was one of the contributing authors for the Methane Abatement Handbook. Let's move on to the next slide. As a reminder, the contents of this slides can be found in more detailed in the book. The book is linked here on this slide. You can go to the website where we'll get into more details in the book, and that's definitely a reference that we would encourage you all to take a look at. And thank you to our sponsor for the book and all of this technical assistance, the State Department Bureau of Energy Resources. With that, Casey, I'll turn it over to you to cover LDAR and Chapter 5. And again, folks, you don't need to watch the videos in sequence, but if you do want to learn more about this technology, this is the right recording for you. So thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Priya. So as mentioned, Chapter 5 focuses on leak detection and repair. So this begins a set of three chapters in the book that do kind of detailed looks at specific regulatory strategies that can be used to reduce emissions. So leak detection and repair, LDAR for short, this usually refers to programs that are designed to identify and address unintended or fugitive emissions from equipment or leaks. LDAR requirements that appear in regulations, they can be implemented without extensive data on specific measures on the level of fugitive emissions. So that is one thing that stands out about LDAR. There are a number of different important design features of LDAR, including the scope, the detection, quantity level, frequency of inspection, and other things, which we'll go through a little bit more in this presentation and finish with a bit of information on Canada's federal LDAR regulation. An overview, what is LDAR? So we're talking about programs designed to stop and to detect and stop fugitive emissions. So these are often sometimes called leaks, but these refer to unintentional losses of methane that could occur at different connection points throughout the supply chain. Typically, these are the emissions where the operator is not aware of the specific location, whether that is because of a malfunction of a piece of equipment, damage to an equipment, or not following the correct processes in a particular case. So collectively, the methane emissions from fugitive emissions are one of the largest sources of emissions from the oil and gas sector. So while each individual emission event may be small, when added up across the value chain, this is really one of the biggest sources of emissions. LDAR programs typically work by requiring periodic surveys that are surveys on site by qualified personnel that know how to do LDAR programs using special equipment. If a leak or emissions event is detected as part of an LDAR survey, the operator is then usually required to fix that leak within a specified time period. And then usually operators are required to document the LDAR process, including reporting and recording records on how often the surveys are conducted, what the outcome of the survey is, and whether the leaks detected are fixed. And one point, I mentioned this before, but really want to emphasize that the LDAR approach does not require robust data on methane emissions in order to function. Essentially, if you go out regularly and you do surveys and you fix the leaks that you find, then you know that emissions are coming down. It doesn't necessarily mean that we know how much emissions are coming down if we're not able to quantify the level of leaks that are repaired. At the same time, we don't have to wait for high quality data and information and quantifiable data to know that LDAR programs work. If you go out, you find a leak and you fix it, that stops the leak. So we'll go through a few slides here on the different features of LDAR that a regulation would need to cover. So this is done in the handbook by looking at several examples from different countries and the types of decisions that the regulator needs to make when they put the LDAR requirement in place. And the first one is on the scope, like what facilities are covered. Obviously, leaks can come from all types of facilities, so it's very important if the scope is limited to not all facilities, which is sometimes the case for very remote sources. It will be important that the leak facilities most likely to lead to emissions are indeed covered. And again, this is really a decision that each country will need to consider in developing their regulation. Another key feature is the detection threshold and what technology is used. There's a bunch of different ways you can conduct this. The simplest is called AVO, or audiovisual olfactory inspections, which really just mean you send a person out to the site, they look around, they notice any unusual smells, they look for any unusual condition. This can work for certain types of emission or certain types of events, but much more effective to use specialized equipment like optical gas imaging cameras, which can see leaks that wouldn't be detectable to the naked eye. And most regulations will specify what technology has to be used for the survey. And just to note, there are many existing standards. One that is used in many cases is called EPA Method 21. So there's a bit more detail in the handbook, but if this is something that you might start to read as you look in other regulations, as it's very common for regulations around the world to refer to EPA Method 21. Another key decision point is on frequency of inspections. The most common frequency that is talked about is quarterly. So that essentially means that the survey must be done every 90 days. Obviously, there's a trade-off. More surveys mean more cost, but the shorter time between when a leak is detected and when it's fixed. So this is really a balance for regulators to consider as to how these costs are imposed. Another point of decision is on repair requirements. The R in LDAR essentially means that the regulation requires the company to repair any leak they find, but there is a question of how long do they need to make that repair. For certain types of leaks, like those that for example, don't require shutdown of equipment, it could be a short time frame, perhaps 30 days. But for ones where there is maybe a very large issue that would take a significant amount of resources and time to repair, there could be a need to have different timeframes, and this should really be about a cost benefit analysis in terms of how big is the leak and how costly would it be to repair. And the final feature I wanted to say a few words about is on reporting, certification, and auditing. Essentially, from the regulatory perspective, many companies are already undertaking LDAR as part of their standard policies. But what the regulated usually do is they ask those companies or require those companies to keep certain records and to make certain reports to their government so that they can ensure that they've actually taken place. But these can include things like how often the survey takes place, the specific date, what equipment was used, what leaks were found, and whether repair action was taken. Sometimes these details are required to be reported directly to the government for enforcement purposes. And there's several slides that you'll be able to view from the slide deck, which is available on the website. But you'll see in the handbook, we do a close look at Canada's federal LDAR requirement, which takes positions on each of the issues I just discussed. So for example, scope of inspected facilities, detection technology and threshold, frequency of inspections, repair requirements, and reporting. I won't go through those in detail, but would encourage you to take a look at the handbook if you're interested in more about how that works. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey. And again, thanks to our funder, the State Department Bureau of Energy Resources, for funding the handbook and this work. As Casey mentioned, do take a look at the recording, at the book itself for more details on this reporting, and stay tuned for the next chapter, chapter 6, which will cover a different technology. Thank you.